Welcome to the first of many to come Platform 9 managed release briefings for the enterprise. This is an exclusive webinar just for our enterprise customers. So it gives us a chance to talk about some more focused features and options and things, as opposed to our free tier and the growth tier customers. I am your co-host, David Dieruff. I am on the technical content team and have been working with my the other host, Chris Jones, in creating this deck. Chris, if you would, please.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time. As always, it's great to be online and chatting with our users. We do these sessions for you. So if you have questions, I would say interrupt us or hit us up on Slack afterwards. We also have Chris Papp. He recently joined Platform 9 and looks after our bare metal offering, our virtualization capabilities, including KubeVirt, and some soon to be announced capabilities for the edge.
Chris, Pat, your 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome. And for those listening, just in case you may wonder when I say the Chris's, that means I'm directing myself at both of them. And I enjoy doing that sometimes. The Chris's. How often do you get the chance for that? Okay. So we are gathered here today to talk about new features in PMK 5.4. So let's just get into it. But first, our legal team told me I have to tell you, what we're going to talk about actually is a part of a release, right? And it's already out there. It's already public. So almost everything you're going to hear is complete fact. And in fact, you can hold us to it because it's already been released. It's generally available. At the end of this, though, we're going to be talking about some future options and features that we're thinking about. Maybe in here along the way, we might mention some of that stuff. And for those, we would ask you not to hold our feet to the fire because, it may or may not happen. Right. So just a quick, here's what's coming at you. In this release, we have some significant UI performance improvements. We've played with cluster add-ons. So that is being able to add applications and things, certified applications into your clusters at the click of a button. We have introduced a cluster upgrade strategy. This is one that is significantly made significant use in my life, upgrading clusters. I think everybody kind of struggles with that. We're getting more in depth with object details. So all kinds of Kubernetes objects, what's going on, what's their status, let me see the logs, let me possibly interact with it, that sort of thing. We have a very cool new feature in storage where we're going to get more in depth, more interactive with all things storage within your clusters. KubeVirt. In fact, Chris is going to be able to show some KubeVirt goodies and some new things that we're introducing, and you'll begin to understand our roadmap for where we're going with KubeVirt. And then probably one of the biggest options or features that we're introducing is cluster profiles. This one, again, really resonated with me personally because RBAC in a cluster is not something I really want to deal with. And this pretty much takes that away from me. So another fun one. All right. So first, our UI performance improvements. So generally speaking, if you've used our UI, possibly in the free tier, that sort of thing, you would have noticed that as you navigate around on pages, it tends to show our spinner when the page loads. And when you're staring at a page, a second is a lifetime when you're sitting there staring at the screen. And so we recognize that. And the thing is, the challenge is every time you click to look at something, we have to go get the details in the cluster of that, right? And that takes a little bit of time. Well, our UI team turned out to have some ninjas in the hiding, and those ninjas came out and said we can make this better. And in fact, they did. Pages are loading significantly faster. A little bit of caching goodness in there and things like that to make the UI just a more pleasurable experience. With that, they also, in doing those little caching secrets, they also got some finer granularity into the APIs. And so you're a little more safer to cache the things because you already have the deep details of the things. So that's kind of cool. Kind of a subtle thing, right? You're not really going to outright see this, or you're not going to notice it until you're really looking for it. And then it'll be a very nice thing to have. In your dropdowns throughout the UI, you can now choose a default cluster. So if you have many clusters and you want to just see objects and things for an individual cluster, you can now declare a cluster and a namespace as your default. The nice thing though is this is per user, right? Because everybody has a different interest here in what's going on. And enterprises don't just have one cluster going. So per user, you can choose your defaults in there. Also on the notifications side in the UI, we have introduced Platform 9 events and cluster errors. We've kind of split those out. And then actually, I'm going to look over to Chris Jones. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a bit of detail on the distinction between the two.
Sure. I think this is a good topic. Anyone that's used Platform 9 may have seen errors that pop up in the inbox tray in the top right-hand corner that's related to various different, I guess, interactions or actions that you're taking through the web app. So those errors loosely can be grouped into two large buckets. One are errors that are coming back from the clusters that we have under management. So that's, you're in the Platform 9 web app and you say, I want to create a pod. And it goes to the cluster. Kubernetes via the API server attempts to take that action and it fails. That's going to be returned back to the UI and it's going to be displayed there under a cluster error. So these are things that are running through the Kubernetes API proxy that we run in the SaaS management plane that securely tunnels all of the interactions from the web app down into the cluster itself. So anything that you do that's taking an action on a cluster is going to be grouped under those cluster errors and events. So that could be deploying a Helm app and it goes wrong. You're going to see the feedback there. Platform 9 events are events that are directly related to our APIs and services that are running in the SaaS management plane. So to use Helm as an example, we run Helm as a service. Let's say for some reason it's misbehaving, or you try to deploy an application, but it can't find that chart. Maybe one of your team members deleted it from the repo. You haven't run Helm update and you're trying to deploy something that doesn't exist. You're going to get an error from Helm. That's going to show up there under a Platform 9 event. The other piece that we worked on to help people understand what's happening with these events is that inbox now has a lot greater detail for each of these events. And if you actually click into those live real time in 5.4, you'll be able to see the event, drill into the event and see a raw version of it if you want to go back to that, or a passed out version of it where you can sort of see exactly the action that was happening and the response either from the clusters itself or from the Platform 9 APIs. One useful thing, if these are happening and it's really impacting your ability to use the platform, hit up support, send those in and file them. We also track all of these with the new system in the back end as well. So we're using them from a continuous improvement perspective as well.
Cool. Thank you. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, what we're going to do here is go through a few slides talking about all the new features. So we just want to make sure that we get all that covered. And then we're going to come back and Chris is going to show some demo of these features. We just want to make sure that we get through all the content and not let the demos absorb up all the time. And I know that some of this stuff, as we're talking, it leaves a little bit to the imagination. So I promise we will circle back and show you some of this. Okay, continuing on, we're going to go over to infrastructure. And so within infrastructure, if you're familiar with the UI, we're talking about clusters, imported clusters, nodes, cloud providers, all those good things, all the ways that you could bring in infrastructure to create your clusters. So in the clusters area, we have we've moved add-ons to the cluster details, right? So previously add-ons were in a kind of its own little separate place, but it didn't necessarily make sense where it was because you weren't kind of correlating the two together. Now, when you go in and look at a cluster's details, you can see all the add-ons. And so in the slide that I'm showing here on the right, you can see the cluster add-ons area, and you just simply click, which ones do I want? This feature I love because some of these things, using metrics server, adding the Kubernetes dashboard, adding Prometheus monitoring, there's a lot there. And it's not quite something that I really want to deal with. I just want it. And so our product team has just made this a checkbox. There is some additional configuration in some of these. So you can see below, as we get into adding tags, etcd backup, config, core DNS config, that sort of thing. You can add some stuff. If the auto scaling box was checked here, you would also see an option for setting some of those parameters.
This is a fairly significant change, David. I think it warrants a little bit more of a in-depth discussion if you're open.
Sure.
So we've always had managed add-ons. These are things that we own the lifecycle of. If there's a new version, we upgrade it, we test it, we make sure it all works. And importantly, we store and maintain the configuration in the SaaS management plane. If it's changed on the cluster, we push it down and we override it. So it maintains that consistency. It's like a GitOps approach to cluster management that we've always had as part of the product. One of the limitations we had was you kind of had to make a decision up front. I'm building the cluster and I really want MetalLB. So you had to put it in, and then you had to put a configuration in, and then we didn't really help you update it in any way, shape, or form. With 5.4 and the changes to add-on manager and moving all of our add-ons in there, including monitoring, this now enables users to dynamically choose when to add and remove those add-ons at any time. Big win. And as you touched on there, there's overrides. What this means is we have overrides that we build and test. So if we use MetalLB as an example, you can provide, n number of IP address ranges to be able to allocate out addresses for your services. MetalLB has a bunch more supported configurations that MetalLB and the open source community test and iterate on. And we have finite resources like everyone out there. So to enable users to get the flexibility to use those additional configurations, we've added two changes into Add-on Manager. One is a feature that's called Watch. What Watch does is it basically signifies to Platform 9, I want this add-on, but I just want the software and I don't want you to manage it. So if you say don't watch it, we're just going to do the life cycle of it, and the configuration of it's all going to be cluster side, and if you make changes, we don't care. The next change are the base 64 overrides. What they are codified pieces of YAML that allow you to provide additional configurations. So if we stay on MetalLB, let's say you want to use named address pools. You can write them out as a specified configuration, provide them to the MetalLB add-on in a base 64 encoded format, and those named address pools will be made available to your services and applications on the cluster as well. So we moved everything into Add-on Manager. They're now completely dynamic. You can choose to deploy them with Watch enabled or disabled. So thinking about that as managed or unmanaged. And you can also provide additional configuration overrides via the Add-on Manager as well. So it's some fairly significant changes, and looking forward to see how our users put it to use.
Cool. Thank you for that. Also on to upgrade strategy. And so this one definitely leaves a little bit to be desired because showing the UI and the interaction for upgrade strategy is pretty darn nice. So we will circle back here in just a minute and get to that. But the gist of it is I have multiple clusters, usually many clusters. Those clusters are probably broken up into different environments, maybe like development environments, that sort of thing. And they need to be upgraded. But they're not all going to be upgraded at the same time. There are, others using these clusters, consuming the clusters, and they need to sign off on things. They need to test their services and their apps and all that. So, and every organization is a little bit different here, about how they do it, how they sign off, and the time taken and all that. So we introduced upgrade strategy. And there's three main focuses here. First is sequential. And so that's just, we're going to go one by one through the cluster and upgrade one at a time. The next is percentage. So I have 10 nodes in the cluster, and I'm going to do 50%. So it's going to upgrade 5 of the nodes. And then it's going to, once it's complete with those 5, then it's going to go upgrade the other 5, right? 50-50. And then batch means I want to do a very custom thing. So of those 10 nodes in my cluster, I want to do, I don't know, all the odd number ones, right? 1, 3, 5, and 7, and 9. And then I want to come back and I want to do the even number ones, but I want to control when the switchover happens between the odds and the evens. That's batch. So there's a little bit of manualness there, but that's tailored to your flavor and your needs for upgrading. In general, so whenever I'm speaking to somebody about an upgrade on a live cluster or upgrading really a node that is within a cluster live, inevitably the question is, what happens to the applications? And so without getting too terribly deep here, the basic steps are, first, the node is going to be scheduled as are actually marked as unschedulable, which means it's telling Kubernetes scheduler no more pods can be run on here. Then it's going to drain the current pods out in a graceful way. Then it's going to shut down the binaries running, the Kubernetes binaries running. So that's kubadmin, those sorts of things. It's going to replace those binaries with a new version of the binary. That's the upgrade. And then it's going to spin it up, verify them, validate them, make sure everything's cool. And then it's going to mark that node as schedulable again in the cluster. So in the process of doing that, Kubernetes is going to be smart enough to say your replica count has this desired number on it. And one of those pods just went away. So I'm going to spin it up somewhere else. So there's a little bit of, when you think about upgrading a cluster, you have to think about latency. What kind of latency am I introducing to the services running within? Because, do I still have 5 instances of it running, or maybe a few less? So this is a very nice, graceful way of doing it, using our upgrade strategy and then playing off of some very natural things that Kubernetes has built in for making sure that we can avert any sort of extraneous latencies and such on your application. Okay, moving on. That was a lot of fun. Now let's go over to workloads. And so in workloads, really the gist here is, as I said at the beginning, we're going to get deep on some objects, right? And in this case, we're talking about pods, deployments, services, and namespaces. Each of those are considered objects in Kubernetes. And each one of those has some level of detail. You may be familiar with labels in there or some sort of configuration, right? In a deployment, you have a number of containers, pods, and things like that are going, all kinds of configuration. In a namespace, well, you have a name and the metadata and everything for these. So we wanted to provide a way within our UI to be able to get some more rich information about these objects what we're going towards is a complete object view, right? And as Kubernetes grows, we want the UI to grow as well with it. So you can be rest assured that you can come to the PMK UI and see, get to all the details about your pods and what's going on, your objects and everything. Along with that, because we built all that in, we said, well, why don't you just be able to create new stuff out of here? So we built some nice interfaces and things for spinning up new objects, all kinds of a nice option there. You got details on details on details about this. The screenshot here that you're looking at is just the beginning. You see the tabs across the top. This is just the overview. Then we can get into events, right? Every object in Kubernetes might have an event that it's producing. So you can get in and see what's going on. Obviously, this is very handy for a very easy way of debugging what's going on with the object instead of having to go to a CLI and dig in there. You just click around and you can see things. The logs. And so with a developer focus, this one is very near and dear to my heart because my applications are going to be emitting logs. And if I'm doing this in a cloud native way, I'm writing my logs to standard out. And so I need to get to that and see what's going on. And so now you can just come to the UI and get to the details of what your containers and your applications are doing and not have to worry about, any sort of login issues or getting access to the cluster, things like that. All that's taken care of for you in the UI. You can also see the live YAML, right? So the YAML that you may send up about an object or the definition of an object to Kubernetes is not the final YAML. There's a lot more added on by Kubernetes about what's going on with the container. And so you have a live view of what's going on there. You can also, if you'd like, change that YAML, but there be dragons. That one is, you get fair warning there. It's a nice option. I think it was a quickie one for us to implement. But everybody knows when you're going in and changing values of a live object, you're taking your life in your own hands. Then you have the option to filter these things, right? Because again, you don't have one cluster, you have many clusters. So you can filter what you're looking at, all the pods, all the deployments, the namespaces by cluster, or you can look at them all. Just a nice one. Back to our other default, right? You're gonna, when you load the page, you're going to see the default cluster and all the objects in there. But just some nice options here for navigating around and getting to the information you care about as quickly as possible. Any details here, Chris?
Details on workloads. I think the details are in the details. Previously, if you're working with any of these Kubernetes objects, we sort of gave a high-level summary. We didn't really help in any way, shape, or form. So this is really something to help developers and DevOps people that want to see what is this container doing, what is this pod doing, what is this service doing, and not having to leave the product, not having to download a kubeconfig, open up kubectl, and get it all going. Or maybe you are using kubectl and you just don't want to have to run describe pod, logs, all of that. So you can use your terminal on one side, the browser on the other side. You can see live what's going on inside of the cluster. It also links really well into, I believe, the next slide, which is talking about all the changes with storage.
Yes. Let's move on. Storage. So take everything that we just talked about, being able to see details on details on details of objects, and let's keep going with that. But let's keep a focus of storage. So when you get into storage, you're talking about the container storage interface, the drivers for it, persistent volumes, persistent volume claims, storage classes. These are things that are inevitable, and they're, in my opinion, not too terribly fun to work with, especially to try to debug, because there's so many moving parts here. And we recognize this. And so we said, we're going to take the time to learn about this and do it right. And then we're just going to give it as a tab or a click of a button to you in our UI. So same as before, you have a complete object view. You can add new things, add new storage classes, mark things as default, what have you. But the nice thing here is if you're looking at the, if you're looking at the screenshot here on my slide, when you look at an overview, now I can see the persistent volumes, the persistent volume claims, how long they've been going, their capacity. This is a lot of information. This is just massively useful screen here on what's going on with my storage, where it's at, who's connected to who, and what state are they in. This one is, in my opinion, just very, very useful information. As the other one, there is live YAML here. As the other one, I warned that there be dragons when you're updating live YAML, but you do have the option for it. And you can filter your view by clusters or viewing all and that sort of thing. Chris, anything here?
This is going to save me time. When I go in and test the product and play with different apps, storage was always 50,000 different, command line commands, especially events. So I'm once again really excited to see how people can make use of this in their day-to-day. The CSI drivers changes are pretty cool. If you install drivers, let's say you use Pure Storage and you're like, I'm going to use their CSI package. When you go to create a storage class, it will automatically detect that and help put together some of the YAML. Obviously, we don't know all of the capabilities that are available in every single driver. So it's the base to get you started, and it will more often than not work. But that's another cool piece there as well, is the ability to find those drivers and allow you to make use of them in a click. Great.
All right. Now we're going to continue on over to KubeVirt. This is the virtual machine side of things. I get to switch Chris's now over to Chris Papp. So as you've seen, if you've been following Platform 9 at all, you've seen that we definitely clearly have a focus in KubeVirt. And if you don't know what KubeVirt is, I'm going to give it a very simplistic explanation of running VMs using Kubernetes. And the VMs could be application VMs. They could be, I guess they could be a desktop, or they just could be dedicated machines, that sort of thing. That's kind of where we're going with this, and putting a little bit of definition around all this, but using the infrastructure that Kubernetes has provided or created to do these things. So we're beginning, to build this out a little bit more, because we've got quite a bit of the infrastructure for KubeVirt support going, and that is in the form of a very nice wizard. And so imagine I want to spin up a VM, and I'm just going to go through 6 steps to provide naming of the VM, the image for the VM, the base image for the VM, define storage for it, put in some fun, networking and such presets, maybe some other custom configurations, and go. And there you have it. There's your VM. Attaching disks, creating, instances versus virtual machines, getting all the details for it, having a player type action, start, stop, that sort of thing. It's so nice. It's so easy to get going with this. And in fact, in this case, we're going to move away from YAML, right? Because it's just not very fun when you're going to define what a VM is in KubeVirt and YAML. That's not a whole lot of fun doing it. So we've put a wizard behind it to be able to do that. And now I'm going to give Chris Papp, because I don't think I did justice to all the work and everything that's been done there. So I want to give him a chance to do some good.
Yeah, no, you covered it. You hit the high points on it. I mean, the idea behind KubeVirt in including it in Platform 9 was to give admins a way to centrally manage their entire Kubernetes environment. And for those applications in our use case that are never going to be containerized, or if it's third-party applications that the customer is relying on somebody else to containerize it, and it's never going to happen, and they want to manage all those applications from a central pane of glass. So that's the use case that we're seeing and the adoption for this. the key here is simplicity and to bring it in. If you've ever added a virtual machine in any of the hypervisors, you should be able to walk through this fairly simple, right? I mean, it's much easier to do than via command line. And we're still doing some tweaks. I think as we go through it and we get more use cases, I think, in fact, Chris just kind of identified one, Chris Jones, that is identified one right before this meeting, where the name should be lowercase, right? If you add an uppercase. So that's something that we'll just have to modify in the UI as we move forward and more people start using it. The key term here is making it easier to manage those virtual machines from an application container standpoint.
Cool. All right. Good things. We got good options here for it, but there's a heck of a lot more to come with this. Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we're going to come over to cluster profiles. So this is a big one. And the gist of this is you define some amount of role-based access. Every cluster, every Kubernetes cluster has it. Every object has it within Kubernetes. Who can interact with this thing and how deep are their interactions? Read, write, that sort of thing. And so inevitably, when you have many clusters, your RBAC tends to move. By no one's fault, really. It just tends to happen. And as new things are added and as clusters grow in lower environments, maybe security just isn't as high of a priority in a development environment as it is, obviously, in a production environment. And so RBAC and role-based access definitions tend to deviate from one another. We've seen this time and again. And so we wanted to offer ways to, at a minimum, report on this, and then at the more interactive way to actually act and do some things on it. And that is what the premise of cluster profiles. So first you have a wizard that you're going to create a profile. So let's say, for instance, we have let's keep it simple and say we actually want the definition of RBAC, the rules of our RBAC to be ubiquitous across all environments, right? That's a true test. We want the development, staging, and production clusters to all have the same RBAC definition. Therefore, we know that applications aren't being introduced to a whole new environment when they get promoted up. It makes the promotion scheme for an application a little more smooth. So we're just going to create one profile, right? That is our golden one. And we'll create it off our production cluster because that's kind of our golden image right now. We'll call that our base profile. Then every so often, we can take that base profile and compare it against the other profiles. And that comparison is done in real time, pretty quick. And once that comparison is done, we're going to get a report of here's what's different about it, what we would call the drift. And then also, that's going to be the drift is the difference between the cluster and the template. And then also we can say, okay, well, what's going to happen if I go in and tell this cluster that's drifted to go back to the golden image, right? And match yourself to the golden image. That would be an impact analysis. What will change on this cluster when we go in and do this? In the meantime the process in between of doing these things, the reality is you or your team are not the only ones using the clusters. There are developers, there are other teams, probably many others that are using it. And so we need to go back and talk this out, meet with everybody and understand what the difference is and what this is going to impact and all that. So that's why we've kind of broken out the two of those, of a drift analysis and an impact analysis, to better understand those two different points of view for this. Chris Jones, I'm sure you have some more opinion here.
Profiles engine. This is a huge addition. I mean, it might seem like a very small beginning, but this is definitely an area of strategic investment for Platform 9. You touched on RBAC. This was as the world of product managers would call the MVP of Profiles engine. We started with RBAC because it is complicated and painful. And from an audit and compliance perspective, you kind of want to make sure you know exactly what access people have and what access applications have on your clusters. And it can often be a change that happens in development that maybe is required for an app to run that's not promoted to production along with the app itself. And then all of a sudden you start running and you have an outage. Hopefully you'd catch that in testing or staging or something. But these promotions can happen. These changes can be missed because they're sort of part of that intersection of infrastructure and application. So there's many reasons that we started with role-based access control. It is a non-destructive application right now. So we aren't going to go and remove the things that should be removed. We made that decision because we wanted to get this into users' hands. We wanted to get feedback. And importantly, we didn't want you destroying your clusters and then ending up on the phone with us and us going to have to go through the process of restoring an etcd backup to bring the cluster back to life. So it's our first release of this, and looking forward to hearing people's input and feedback, and can't wait to sort of show it off in live real time.
We could easily take this whole hour just talking about the possibilities here of what you can do, and getting into comparing verbs about different things and objects and all that. So I promise there was a lot more to come with this in the future, but I highly recommend getting in and getting your hands on with this cluster profiles and the analysis engine and all that, because this will make your day a heck of a lot easier. All right. So now we're going to change over to a little bit of our own access, right? We were talking about RBAC and the object access, but within PMK, you also have a layer of identity and access to the product. And that is expressed in terms of tenants and such. And so we built this out a little bit so that you can choose tenants and roles. The tenants and role users will be assigned to in each tenant. So when you have multiple tenants and you have multiple users and you have multiple roles, you have created a matrix of possibilities for doing things. And so we recognize this. And as I said before, you don't have one cluster, you have many. And you have a lot of people using those clusters, and everyone needs some flavor of access to what their role is and how they want to consume the cluster. And so every enterprise is different about how they may define this and who it is. And so we want to respect that, and we want to build this out and give you the possibility to define this matrix of things. So we're introducing the notion of groups and such within tenants. And you can also associate clusters to it. So somebody can be a part of a tenant and have certain access to one cluster and different access to a different cluster, that sort of thing. This is a very, very nice to have, and a very, very, I think, welcome feature in the enterprise space for sure.
Yeah, that's been there for single sign-on, right? So if you turned on SAML, you could leverage groups. So these are, I would like to call them sort of local Platform 9 groups. It's fully integrated into the cluster and RBAC as well as Profiles Engine. So if you've got a bunch of developers that have local Platform 9 accounts and you want to make them all have the same RBAC, drop them in, go and apply it to a cluster, and then use the Profiles Engine to roll it out.
Yet another reason that we're going to make your day a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. So just some other quick notables, which one of these is not that small of a thing to be talking about. But, in 5.4, we've introduced 1.21 for your clusters, right? And going back to that upgrade engine should make this pretty darn easy, hopefully, moving up from different clusters. If you haven't seen it, the easiest way to do this, or at least see what the state of things are when you go into the infrastructure area of the UI and you look at your clusters, it will tell you the current version of your cluster, and it will give you a very, very nice friendly link that says upgrade now if you aren't on that latest version. And that will introduce the upgrade wizard to you. So 1.21 is now an option. And then something that should be more than just a bullet point, because it's quite a big thing, is the introduction of Containerd following the deprecation of the Docker host during an upgrade. And so actually, I'm going to hand this to Chris Jones to maybe give a little bit more detail here.
On Containerd, this is a change that we have to make. Kubernetes is bringing this upon all of us. 1.21 introduces Containerd in early access stage. If this is something you do want to run in production and you're an enterprise customer, please do reach out to support. Let's have a conversation, and we'll make sure that all things are in place to enable you to do that. If you want to migrate from the Docker runtime to Containerd, you can do this during a cluster upgrade, and we recommend that as the right place to do it. The reason for this is during an upgrade, we will switch the runtime and we'll make all of the appropriate changes during the upgrade cycle, including going through, and depending on the strategy you choose, restarting all of the Kubernetes and related components, trying to mitigate any outages for your applications. If you want to do this after an upgrade, it can be done. We do have steps documented as a knowledge base article on how to do this, and our support can help you step through that. It does require a few more manual interactions to make sure that all pieces of the Kubernetes clusters are stopped, started, and resumed in the right order for this not to be a problem. Worst case is you change the container runtime, you add a new node, and that new node comes up running Containerd, and all the other ones are running Docker. That's going to be a not great situation. So it's there. Approach with caution, and we are here to help.
Cool. That the headlines out there would have you believe that changing over from Docker to Containerd is, hey, just stop and restart, something like that. And the authors of those articles don't have things in production because it ain't that easy.
Yeah.
When you're in production and you're going to change the container runtime, that is a non-trivial task. But you are a customer of Platform 9 just for this reason, because we are taking the time to prove this out and see what it's really like and see where the options are of where do we need to offer customizations here to our customers, and where do we need to offer opinion about it. We're going through all the difficulty of that to then bring a complete solution to you to say, would you like to upgrade? Let's do this. I would say for your friends that maybe manage some clusters that aren't with Platform 9, I would use this as a way to go back and dangle it in their face and say, look how easy it's going to be for me to move to Containerd because I'm with Platform 9. But then again, if you have friends that aren't on Platform 9, send them over to us. Geez, what are you doing? All right, let's continue on. Right, so we're that's the gist of 5.4, where we're going with things. So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about 5.5. This is a very minimal list here, I will admit. But let's talk about some things happening in 5.5. And actually, you know what? I'm going to hand this to the Chris's because I think that they have a better view of what's coming, being that they own the roadmap. So either Chris, would you mind just giving us a brief snapshot of what's coming up?
Yeah, I was really hoping you're gonna jump in and commit us, and then I could say it wasn't me.
No, done that before. Not doing that again.
5.5. Continued focus on really enhancing the sort of the IDE experience. So, we did the workloads investments for pods deployment services. We're going to finish that out from all things that are sort of loosely termed as workload objects. So jobs, cron jobs, replica sets, stateful sets, daemon sets, all of that goodness, the same views of events, logs, if they're applicable, relationships building between all of those related objects as well. So it's going to be a significant investment. more back-end UI work to better handle API changes, to improve the speed and how data is loaded into the UI as well. So that's all there. Cluster profiles is going to see some investment as well. And there's some other items that I am not at liberty to discuss, but really looking forward to those coming in as well as part of 5.5.
That sounds like fun.
Tentatively, 5.5, we generally target 8-week development cycles and a whole bunch of testing. So we're gonna make a game time decision this year whether or not we release right before the Christmas and holiday break, or if we give everyone at Platform 9 a nice new year and make this generally available at the very start of January. So stay tuned, and you'll see more to come.
Cool. Thank you for that. Mr. Papp, on the KubeVirt bare metal side, just give us a quick rundown if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we're gonna add do host plumber OVS enhancements. We're planning on doing add-on version upgrades, and then from a networking perspective, including DHC server for secondary networks. And then from a bare metal side, what we're currently working on is making a move to Metal Cubed from a Kubernetes side. So it's still using some of the backend Ironic, but we're building out the UI as we speak right now to support bare metal through Metal Cubed. And I do have, not to be outdone by Chris Jones, I got some super top secret awesomeness that we're working on. That an announcement will come out and here soon, hopefully over the next week or so.
Ooh, that sounds like fun. All right. Cool. So a quick shameless plug here. Please do, if you take a moment, please do go on Twitter, tell us how much you love us. Anything less than that, just, contact support, you know what I'm saying? Or on LinkedIn, please subscribe to us, our channel on LinkedIn. We have a lot of great content coming out, a lot of helpful things happening all the time. Just as a reminder, we're always here for you, right? Our success team is here to make sure that you are successful. And so here's a few different ways. If you can't get a hold of the success team by one of these 4 ways, then I don't think it was meant to be. All right. And now with that, I am going to hand things over to Chris Jones. I will stop sharing. And let's see a little bit of this hands-on.
Cool. I'm going to click share my screen. Let me know if there are any issues. We good?
That's good.
We're cooking with gas. All right. This is a fun environment. It's running 5.4. Full disclosure, this is in our staging environment because I always like to live on the edge. Up front, when you log in, you might not notice a huge number of changes. I will touch on the dashboard. We have stripped this down to clusters, nodes, and clouds as a summary. If you're on our next generation platform, you can actually come in and decide to add and customize things and drag it around and click save. If there are different widgets and spinners and objects that you'd love to see on here, please do let us know. Always looking for great things that we can add here. As you can see, it's dynamic, and that loaded pretty darn quick. So that's a nice incremental change there. Back to our clusters view. I do not have any running for an upgrade. These are all on our current and latest version. But you will see here that I've got a mix of Containerd and Docker clusters. 5.3, we split out these health statuses as well to make it a lot easier to understand. To be very clear, connection status is, are the nodes connected to Platform 9? Physically, we have connectivity. Platform 9 components are all of our software that we're running. And then API server health is the Kubernetes API server. What you will notice is this tiny little yellow star. This is where I've set my default cluster. So every time I go to workload, storage, apps, monitoring, RBAC, 5.4 Bare OS is what's going to load. So that's how you set that. We touched on the edits. for add-on manager. So if you click edit cluster, you'll see, you can change the name. You can see the cluster version. Then we're going to scroll down. We have all of our cluster add-ons are listed out here. So you can choose to add and remove these if you choose. I would definitely recommend do not turn off core DNS. That will be catastrophic. To demonstrate MetalLB, you can click that, coming down here and start adding address pools at any time of this cluster's lifecycle. Storage, you can add, you can configure the retention. You can add a storage class and give it a storage size, which means that the metric history now, once it's set, will be persistent for the lifetime of this cluster. Unless you do come in and disable monitoring, then obviously it's going to get uninstalled. So that's a cool change as well. Helps enable some extra customizations. And what else can we touch on the clusters dashboard? Without having the ability to do the upgrade on this one, I will actually switch to here. Obviously, this is a dead cluster, but when you click upgrade available, it will give you the ability to select what you want to move to. So in this case, do I want to do a 120 or a 121 upgrade? And then choose the upgrade strategy. Obviously, this cluster is completely offline, so none of this is going to work. This is just a demonstration purposes. That's what the upgrade strategy introduces. Going back over here, I reckon we should jump into to workloads. As you can see, this has already had a facelift in terms of how we display workloads. But importantly, we've added the ability to just click. And now all of a sudden, I'm looking at this pod in real time as it's running on my cluster anywhere in the world. I can see the container. If it's in a status other than running or has a message, you're going to see that there. You can see details. You can see related services and drill down into those. You can see any volume claims, config maps, or ingresses that are being configured. And importantly, you can see events. Now, this pod doesn't have any events, which is always a positive. If there were events, you would actually see them listed here. Click on logs. You can then come in and you can see all of the logs for the containers. If there was multiple containers, you would actually see this repeating. You can click full view logs and you can scroll in and you can see exactly what's going on within this container. If you want to send this to one of your developer buddies, click copy, send that over to them. Or if you just want to spam someone Slack, it's another great way to do that as well. And as David touched on, there is the ability to come in and edit YAML. Do this with caution. There is a reset button and an apply button. If you do break this, you are going to have to go back to start. The reset will not reset between saves. It will reset between what we loaded and what you updated. But if you click save, you're into a choose your own adventure world, as I like to say. So this is available across deployments and services. As always, if there's nothing in a namespace, you're going to have to change it up. PF9 monitoring is always a great one. What's going on here? I can see it's got one pod. It's running. I can see events. I can see logs. Oh, that's not ideal. That's unfortunately some of the perils of being on a staging environment. Let's get back in there. Jump into services, exactly the same capabilities here. So you can drill in, might want to change to all namespaces and see what services I have running. Are they all healthy? Yes, cool. How do I connect to them? I think that's a great question. I've actually got 30 here. I'm going to expand this to 50. And let's find our Grafana UI service. So I can drill into this. I can see its pod. I can see the internal endpoint. And I can see that it's configured just with a cluster IP. You could come in and edit this YAML if you wanted to, and change this to be an available on a node port. Click save, and you've got external access. But it is a great way to come in and view what's going on with your services. Storage we touched on. Previously we showed storage classes, and there wasn't really much you could do. Now you can drill in and you can see that this is brand new. I just deployed it an hour ago and nothing's using it. Any related events are here. And once again, the YAML is there for you to come in and edit to your heart's content. I'm going to change back to this one because this has a lot more storage going on. Cluster called delete me. If I do all, you're going to see storage clusters, classes across all the clusters that I have running, or in this case, not running. And let me see, let's go into Azure File. This is actually an imported cluster. This is an AKS cluster that I am pulling that data from. So showing how we can do this across clusters we build and also externally manage. Let me see, AWS default running as well. Maybe I want to see my CSI drivers across all my clusters, see what's going on here. That's also available across all clusters. And once this finishes loading, you actually see in the background that we're mapping the persistent volumes and the persistent volume claims into each of these. So you can sort of see the relationship that's going on there. And we're going to further building out these links so you can start going from, CSI driver to a persistent volume claim to maybe the pod that's going on there as well. And last but not least, we've actually got a storage provider's capability that is the demo gods failing on me. There it is. We're going to start adding in the ability to one-click deploy storage from the user, the UI as well. Going to start off with Rook and OpenEBS, but that'll be a nice addition. So you can build a cluster, add storage, and get going super quick as well. The next piece I wanted to jump into is virtual machines. Chris, do you want to share or do you want me to continue?
Go ahead and continue.
All right. Virtual machines. As always, here's some I prepared earlier. So as we mentioned, this is something that's in early access, and we're continuing to make investments into enhancing virtual machine management from within Kubernetes and PMK, as we call it. You might be wondering why there two. Why do I have virtual machines and virtual machine instances? Brilliant question. Upstream, there is a definition of what a VM and a VM instance is. Think of a VM as almost your template. And this is something you can say, I want to turn on, turn off, restart. And when it's powered off, it's just sitting here as something that you have the ability to quickly turn on. Once it's turned on, it actually turns into an instance. So you would have it running here. That's really the difference. You can make instances, and they kind of have their own life cycle, but they're a little bit more, let's say, static, right? You can pause and unpause and delete. You can't really sort of shut them down. So there's a few different life cycle options between the two. So you can see your VMs here. Importantly, you can come in and step through this nice, easy wizard for creating a virtual machine as well. I am not going to do that. If you want to do a deep dive, we should probably set up a separate session. Same with profiles. I'm actually going to change views here to this demo environment. Profiles, I think we should do a dedicated deep dive on with everyone. As we touched on in the what is new, this allows you to create a profile based off an existing cluster and then go and deploy it out. So let's say test profile baseline. I can click edit. You can see what's in here. So all of my bindings as well as all of my roles. And importantly, if I want to see how a cluster is different to a profile, you can run a drift analytics. So I've done a comparison between that profile and a cluster I call delete me. I can see what is in it. And then each of these tabs tells me how is the cluster different from the profile. So I can see here there's a bunch of bindings as well as the roles themselves that are not compliant with what is in the cluster. I can see what is compliant, represented in blue, and I can see that Kube State Metrics is not compliant. I can see that Calico is missing on the cluster, and if I was to apply that, it's going to get added along with 27 APIs. And then from a role perspective, the same thing, right? What's there will be unchanged, And what's not compliant, kube state metrics once again.
Would you, Chris, would you mind just looking at the details of that kube state metrics, just so we can see? This is just so useful. It's such great information to understand really what it is and what's going to happen.
Indeed it is. And we are at the top of the hour. I am unfortunately double booked.
Oh.
So I will
Right.
have to bid you
Well,
all.
that was actually very good timing. I think we're at an end. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to see further demos about any of these features, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I would say pretty much anyone at Platform 9 would be happy to help you. Obviously, your customer support team might be your first line of contact there, but we would love to show you further what these things are, what options you have. We are happy to get as deep as you would like to get on any of this. Right. And with that, thank you for your time. The Chris's, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. See y'all.